you look at our firm and we're 80% or so, female, and we're white and black and brown and Asian and immigrants. And all of those people are in the GP, or all those people are in leadership. And we did that not for optics. I don't care about optics. Those people know things and see things that I can't see. When we're talking to deals, there will be a founder who has an idea that is worth backing, that it would never register with me, right? And I need somebody else on the team to say, you mean well, but you're an old white dude. That's not the market for this. And so let me explain to you why this is valuable and why this is important.
Welcome to another edition of Be the Change Georgia, where we amplify the voices of the inspiring business leaders surrounding the B Corp and social impact movements across the Southeast to help you learn how to build your legacy at the intersection of people, planet, purpose, and profit. Today, Nathan had the pleasure of sitting down with Mark Hubbard, General Partner at Renew Venture Capital. Renew Venture Capital's mission is to solve society's biggest challenges by purposely renewing how we invest in and help build companies, all while leading with empathy. Mark has founded, invested in, or mentored thousands of enterprises from startups to global corporations in his almost 30 years in venture capital, global private equity, and institutional asset management. In this episode, you'll hear how Renew built an inclusive and diverse leadership team, what sets some founders apart from others, and the importance of investing in relationships. Let's jump right into this episode with Mark Hubbard. Over to you, Nathan.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of Be the Change Georgia. We're excited today to have Mark Hubbard with us from Renew Venture Capital. Mark, how are you this morning?
I'm wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on. I'm a big fan of yours, as you know, and a fan of what you're doing here. Although you tend to go a little deep, which makes me nervous. So we'll see what happens.
Well, luckily for you, we keep these episodes short and digestible, so we can't go too deep. All right. Well, let's get rolling then. One of the questions I love to open with, and we talked a little bit about this before, but what do you wish everyone understood about your profession and the purpose that fuels your personal why?
All right. About the profession. I guess, look, venture capital is sort of seen as a sexy industry and something that people want to have to interface with or want to interface with, or, and therefore generates a lot of active, hot thought, lots of hot takes, right? In both directions, both supporting and against, and a lot of those are earned. I guess because of what we do. We're an impact firm and we're an active manager, and so I wish more folks probably understood that venture capital is not a thing, like in and of itself. Venture capital is really just early stage investing. Sometimes it's growth stage investing, but by using some kind of pooled, time-bound, termed vehicle. And beyond that, you can do anything. And so there's all kinds of, mercenary, awful ways to operate, right, within that framework. And there's all kinds of redeemable, value building ways to interact as well. And your experience, right, will vary a lot as a founder based on the way that firm tends to operate. But don't approach it as if venture is one thing. You'll go to a conference and talk to 8 different funds, and they'll all tell you 8 contradictory things about that are the rules about how the industry works. And so find one that matches with you. My personal why. I think my personal why is sort of based in my faith tradition, but I think we're going through this moment in the world where a lot of people, almost everybody wants to start to align, wants to integrate their lives more, right? They want to start to align what they say they believe about the world, what they say their values reflect, with what their money makes possible in the world, right? And that's sort of a new thing. It's a new thing to happen at scale for people to want to do that. And it's a big opportunity for the world. We need a lot of active capital trying to do good in the world. And so we're trying to build that market.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, and you meet a lot of people too now where, just like you said, VC is kind of this like sexy phrase. It's like impact investing has become that way as well. Of like, oh, I'm an impacted. Everybody like throws some sort of like catchy term in front of. I mean, whatever. Even beyond VC, the VC world, they just everybody loves to say they're a social entrepreneur and like, what problem are you solving? Well, I haven't figured that out yet. Um,
Yeah. No, I mean, there are lots of challenges in the industry. I mean, look, I launched the firm because I'd spent a career in sort of high level global institutional asset management. Right. And then at the same time, all of my private work for 25 years, because I'm old, has been in the impact world. And so I watched both of those industries develop, right, back when impact was largely sort of flowing out of the nonprofit world into now where, including ESG, you can argue it's a 50 trillion or more dollar industry. And yet I watch them develop in ways that I think don't necessarily serve the best founders of the next couple of decades. Right. And so, so you're touching on some of those issues, that there's a lot of surface level discussion around these things when the real solutions are deeper and harder. But that's an unusual framework.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the world I live in with B Corps.
Yeah.
So, going back into that kind of the your background and the why of, but I'm curious to know like who or what experiences motivated you to define your mission as solving society's biggest challenges by purposely renewing how we invest in and help build companies, all while leading with empathy. Where does that come from?
Yeah, well, that's one of those where you want to make sure that's off the website. You want to make sure every one of those words means something. So there's a lot in there. I mean, I guess let me explain our thesis that sort of goes behind all the stuff that we invest in across a venture studio and a fund and a big non-accredited investor effort we're about to launch called Purpose Rounds. Really, we focus on two kinds of founders. One is we want to back impact companies that want to be big companies, right? That want to grow big and do well and make money and exit. Those founders can be anybody. So that founder can be a white guy. That's fine. All that matters is that it's an impact company and that the impact is bound into what they do, right? So that the bigger they get, the more impact is created. And that can then mean a lot of things. That can be fintech or femtech or ag tech or clean tech, right? Or health tech. So there's lots of options in there, but that's one category. The other category we back are women and historically excluded founders. And those companies don't have to be pure impact plays, because there is impact in trying to open up this asset class to those founders. I mean, I don't know if you know those numbers. I'm sure you do, but women in general, founders and historically excluded founders, that wording chosen intentionally, are basically, cut out from the venture capital world. They get very, very tiny amounts of capital flow. And so trying to back those people and work on that sort of what is, an injustice is part of what we do. So that's what, that's what that sort of means then, right? Is that we want to try to find those kinds of founders and support them and resource them so that they can make a difference in the world.
No, I love that. I mean, and going back, you had an event recently about the topic of sustainability, and that was DEI was one of the components too of at what point is this not sustainable when, and I forget where I found the statistic that less than 1% of venture capital money goes to founders of color. And when you read that, you're just like, how? We had Mecca Mecca Moritart from Startup Runway on the show recently, and she was throwing stats out there that were like literal head exploding, unreal, that you knew it was bad, but when people start to quantify it with actual statistics, you're like, whoa, it's still really bad. Even, as we make all this and we all have made commitments, it's still at a rather appalling level.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like, I'm an old white guy, and so if you're an old white guy that grew up in the U.S., who's a nice guy, I think in general you probably don't quite understand the depth of systemic racial issues in this country until somebody starts throwing stats around that don't make any sense, right? That really just, you look at them and go, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I contribute to that stuff. But then if I don't contribute to it, I sort of felt like maybe nobody did. But this is a statistic. And so this is the dynamic. This is what life is actually like for a group of people. And in this country. And I can't argue with that statistic. And so I think there's a lot of that. One of those is, that when you look at both women and excluded founders, you're talking about 1 to maybe 3% on the super high side of capital flows, which both ought to make people sort of generally, I would argue, right, ought to make you sort of generally angry, just from a a justice lens, right? Women are at least, let's say, half the population, maybe more, and so the idea that 3% or 4% of capital flows would go to women founders doesn't make any sense. But the bigger issue is, and it's really for that part of the fund, it's the investment thesis, is that venture capital is basically built completely, like 100%, on the idea that you can see TAMs, you can see markets, right, that other people can't see, right? That's the whole thing. When you look back at Uber or Airbnb, or right, when you evaluate Airbnb early on, everybody's like, well, how big is the hotel market? And that can't really, well, guess what? That wasn't the market. There was a much bigger, different market there that they could see, or maybe couldn't, or whatever, that developed that they could see that other people couldn't see. And almost all the giant successes are those situations. So if you just exclude, if you have any idea that genius might be, evenly distributed, right, and opportunity is not, and you just exclude huge swaths of the population, then there have to be just incredible ideas, right, in that population, that because of their particular experiences in life, right, that they can see that I'm not going to see, because of my particular experiences. And so therefore there's, that's got to be a huge problem in the industry, right? There's just got to be huge lost opportunity in not including those folks, right, and at every level of the industry. So it doesn't make any sense. We're working to try to fix that.
It's awesome. It's noble work. And speaking of which, you building out your leadership team at Renew, talk us through that process, how you went about it, the intentionality behind it, and just the importance of having that diversity and inclusion shown, like, on your leadership team. How did, just walk us through that process, walk us through the decision making, walk us through also the benefits that you've seen as you've been actually going out and deal flow and all those components.
So Renew started with Paul and I, and Paul was my college roommate. So we're two exactly the same age, middle-aged white guy with facial hair and black glasses. We're both 6'4", basically share a brain. His is just the creative half. And Paul is the best product person I've ever known. Design, UX, UI, branding, has a very illustrious career. And so he's a huge asset to founders, as you can imagine, who are trying to build products that delight customers and do that in a smart way and build teams. And he's incredible on all those fronts. And so between he and I, right, you'd think maybe we could go to market and do fine. 2 GPs, that's not unusual, especially early on. Economics of early funds aren't great, right, to be honest with you. And so that's what tends to happen, even in an impact context, right, where we're trying to talk about backing the kinds of founders we're talking about. And that wasn't good enough for us. And I'll get it put sometimes when I'm talking to somebody, they'll say, even the optics, that wouldn't be good for optics, and which makes me want to throw a chair through a window, because I don't give a care about the optics of the thing. The truth is, everything I just described about TAMs, for instance, right, also applies to how you run a firm. I mean, first of all the research also shows that, like, women manage money better than men, and right, none of that sort of matches up with the way industries are built either. But you look at our firm, and we're 80% or so, female, and we're white and black and brown and Asian and immigrant, right? And all of those people are in the GP, or all those people are in leadership. And we did that not for optics. I don't care about optics. We weren't trying to take advantage of opportunity. Those people know things and see things that I can't see, right? Like, when we're talking to deals, there will be a founder who has an idea that is worth backing, that I absolutely it would never register with me, right? And I need somebody else on the team to say, you're an idiot, say, look, you mean well, but you're an old white dude, and this isn't, that's not the market for this. And so let me explain to you why this is valuable and why this is important. And I'm not going to, no matter how sort of open I am and open-eyed I am, I'm not going to see those things. And so you have to have people like that, on top of the fact that, yes, also, there didn't used to be a whole lot of options of where founders went in the venture world, and there are now. And so, people like to work with people who can understand them at some kind of core level. And sometimes, no matter how hard I try, which I will try, I may not be able to, right? And so, it's not for optics, it's not for representation. It's because this, that's the way it's the way you should strategically actually do business. And by the way, it's also the way the industry should be built. And we are trying to push sort of the industry in this direction as well.
So, Mark, I'm curious, when you speak to younger audiences who are starting their careers, what do you believe is foundational about the way they approach their work and lives as they enter the real world?
I guess I'd say two things. One, the first one is not the second one will be the advice I always give when I'm on a panel. But because they'll invariably at the end, do you have any advice for everybody? And so I'll do the first one first. The first one would be really try not to tie your identity and your sense of value up with the business. That's not an easy thing to actually execute on. And it usually requires, some other kind of framework or lots of work or lots of conversation, or sometimes it's done, in the context of a faith structure. That's how it, happens to be with me. But you have to have some kind of why and identity that flows from something else, not just the business, because the business will eat you up and chew you out, and really, eat you up, chew you up, spit you out, regardless of how great it goes. It just will. You'll be in the fetal position. Everybody that's on this thing that's listening who has ever been a founder has been in the fetal position. You haven't even been a founder all that long, and you've probably been in the fetal position, trying to breathe. But often that comes from the idea that you have some deep sense of identity tied up in the success of this thing, and it's being threatened, right? And that kind of existential crisis is a hard thing. And so trying to do some of that deep work so that you're not quite as exposed in that way is helpful. The general advice I give, and it's not advice that I follow particularly well, but I realized after it just hit me. It's not anything particularly deep, but it hit me after sort of a 3 or 4 year period of something that I guess you would probably I would have called a failure at the end. But so this, if you're a founder, this thing that you're in right now, it's everything, right? Like it's, it put you in the fetal position. Like it sort of feels like this is the rest of my life. And this is everything I am, all tied up in this thing and all my relationships and all, right? This is it, this thing has to be successful. And, well, at some point that thing that is everything to you right now, it will be completely over. Probably, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now. It's very unusual, right, that you end up in a Facebook situation where 20 years down the road, you're still doing, you're Mark Zuckerberg. So almost all the time, 99.999% of the time, in 5 or 10 years, even if he goes public, right, it will be over, like done. You won't be doing it at all anymore. And at that moment, right, you may have less money, or you may have more money. Like you may have made a ton of money out of that thing. You may be sitting in a giant house, or you may be trying to figure out how you could rebuild. And it may feel like a huge success, and it may feel like it was a bummer and a failure. At that moment, when you're sitting in that chair, you will realize that the only thing you have at that moment, actually, because the money's not actually really a thing, you'll find out. The only thing you'll have are the relationships that you built while you were doing the thing. And so if you don't tend to those, if you don't make that a priority while you're going along, you'll have nothing. Right. And I've been in that situation before. I'm not great at that. where, you work intensely with lots of people for a long time, and then at some point it's over and you're sitting in a chair and you think, I don't really know any of those people really. And I really don't have relationships there. And that's the only real thing. That's the only thing that lasts and goes on forever. And so you have to be, you have to tend to that, or you won't do it, and you'll be really sorry, even if you get rich.
Yeah, I think even in regular old jobs, I mean, I think back at jobs I've had and some of the friends that those relationships that have endured, and you're like, how do you know him? It's like, we rented cars at Enterprise together in like 2006. Like, I don't know. That's still my best friend though. Like, so yeah, I think you're right. In all things business is tending to relationships, and having those as you come out too. And I mean, you never know where those roads will lead again, when you might need that person or they might need you. And it will open opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, that answer was one of those where you're like, we could end it right here, but I have more questions. I have more questions for you.
Oh no, not more questions.
Oh, here's where we go deep. No,
am I going to cry?
Yeah, get in that fetal position.
Shoot, I'm going to cry. All right.
So from what you've seen through investments you've made, what, as we look at founders, what do you think makes some founders more successful? And I would argue happy, not necessarily from what you just, same argument you just laid out, that, money isn't everything. But obviously there's some element that comes with success that comes with money. But what do you think makes some founders more successful and happy than others?
Yeah, well, I don't know. B, so, success is a weird, what the heck does that mean? Right. Like, as in most conversations that matter at all, like the answers completely depend on the definitions of the words in the question, right? And success tends to be a relatively, personal thing from person to person. And so there are people that, do incredibly well from a business perspective, right, that a lot of people would look at and not call successful, right, and based on some other standard. So that's hard in and of itself. I mean, founders that do well in their businesses, I would say, do often have some sort of singular focus. They do have an ability to not get distracted. I mean, founding a company stinks. Like, it's mostly not fun, and it's, incredibly hard. I will tell founders all the time, like, that I think you should do this, and I think you'll be great at it. And, but however hard you think this is going to be, it's going to be, like 5 times that hard. And even if it goes really well, I think there's a pretty good chance at the end of that, you'll look back and say, I'm not sure I'd have done it if I didn't know how hard it would be. And so, like, it's better to go into it, understanding that that's the case, that you could have that perspective. But founders who do well often have, some kind of deep focus. Hopefully it's some kind of, out of some kind of healthy source, and not out of something that drives them into the ground. Like we talked about earlier, because that can make you successful too, right? Something to prove something to yourself, or prove something to your dad, or prove something to, and you can unwind the therapy of all of that someday down the road. But right now it's going to make you, it's going to make your business successful. The other things I would say, about particularly early stage is, and we see this a lot in sort of what I call startup theater, what a lot of people call startup theater. Don't confuse activity, and don't confuse attention for progress. That really neither one of those things is progress. That's why I'll generally only do panels, or, every time I do a panel and you see me, at some point I'll say, by the way, folks, like, we got to stop going to panels. Like, I know it feels like we're doing something here, but, your customers aren't in the room, and, like, I don't, and look, relationships are important, and an ecosystem, institutions are important, and there's things that have to be done to build those and tend to them. And that's all true. It's particularly true when you make it authentic and, deep and real. But, as a founder, when you're constantly trying to sort of keep the demons at bay, going to a whole bunch of events and taking selfies on rooftops with a bunch of other founders feels like you're doing something. And, I don't know, maybe you're not, right? Like, it's certainly not making progress in the business, which is ultimately what you're trying to do. And so, and by the way, the same thing happens. This happens in impact a lot. other people will find that giving you attention is good for them. And therefore you can get a lot of attention that isn't really based in any kind of thing that will ultimately help you. And unless you recognize that and then try to force it to help you, right? Try to really find strategic ways to leverage it for you and your business. You can do a ton of that. Right. And have it basically not matter. You can be the guest of honor at a lot of Aspen Institute dinners that don't do a thing for your business and feel like, and get lots of material for social and feel like that was something real when it really probably wasn't actually anything real. And they did get, like, they extracted out of you what they needed, right, at that moment. And so just being clear-eyed about that and making sure that all of your activity drives back to something that actually helps you in the business, I think is useful. And great founders, can do that, can constantly find way. And that's not being mercenary. That doesn't mean, that you're mercenary and you're transactional, and you can do that in deep, authentic ways, but you have to force yourself. I mean, life sort of beats you into mediocrity, right? And so you can't just like be committed to you have to war against it. Right. And so the best founders sort of war against mediocrity hopefully in some kind of healthy way.
Well, and I think it comes back to some of where you mentioned that it, however hard you think this is going to be, it's going to be 5 times harder. And it gets into a time prioritization too, of like learning to say no has been, for me, in my early stage entrepreneurial journey, it's been just when to say no. And like, hey, that event looks like fun. I'm sure I missed out on a connection at some, but at some point you're like, I need to sleep. I need to spend time with my partner. I need to, all the other things of life, that it's okay to say no. And I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with.
Yeah. I think so. It all, also as things progress, which you find out, you're finding out, like the level of yield you'd get off of a particular kind of activity gets relativized, right? Like, I mean, at first any activity feels like it's something, and it just felt good to go do a thing and be out there and like meet and talk to people. And then you'll get an opportunity or have an experience with something that really, that really hits, that really, oh my gosh, I got like 5 new clients out of this particular kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, all the just random stuff, right, gets relativized. And you're like, oh no, this is the real thing. I need to do more of this. Right. And then, there'll be another step above that, another step above that. And so, but you got to be intentional about trying to find those, because otherwise you can just sort of be placated. You can be, being around people and taking selfies and posting stuff on social can really feel like it's it can make you feel good, in a way that's maybe not helpful. And so yeah, like you said, you got to be focused.
Yeah. And be honest with yourself of was that event a success? Not that you have to necessarily close a deal out of it, but is it adding to your top of funnel? What was the outcome, and go into it with the expectations of getting some sort of outcome as well.
Yeah. And maybe just like building deep relationships with people that will never make you a dime, is success, right? Is what you would have wanted to have happen out of that meeting. That's totally fine. But then go into it with that intention and make that happen at that meeting. Because you can also just be there and be busy. I'll do that. Be there and be when I'm at the center, I can be, entertain and be charming. And when I'm not, I'll be in the corner with my phone, because I'm an introvert, pretending I'm doing something. That didn't do anything for anybody. If the idea was not commercial but relational, then make it that.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. One last thing before we wrap here. We already asked for the big, the end of panel. What's one piece of advice you'd give the listeners? So I'll give you an or question here. What's one big takeaway you want listeners to get from this episode? Or the wild card, what's one question you wish I had asked you and I didn't? And obviously you get to answer your own question.
Something I wish you would. I don't need, what you ask. You ask really good questions. So I don't know that we necessarily missed anything. I mean, in general, I think it's valuable. I have very particular whys for why I'm doing what I'm doing, for why I got an impact. If you really care about them, and you're willing to not feel like I feel like I seem like a crazy person, you can go to the website and like look at our blogs. And I have a blog where I talk about a theology of impact and investing and why that's important to me. I don't care if you I don't, whatever. It doesn't matter if you match those, those sets of beliefs or not. But I do think it's important that people work through their whys. And there's not a whole lot of that. We don't do a lot of that because it's difficult, right? It's you get into values, and values aren't agreed upon, and so I can't really we can't do that, right? It's not worth doing. What is worth doing, and the best work really flows out of some kind of idea of a sense of why. And we're at a moment where we don't, in society in general, where we don't do that, right? I mean, if you watch a lot of there's great moving, movies that right now, for instance, where the message is basically, that nothing matters, nothing is real, right? Oh, but love is real, and that matters, and it doesn't matter that those are contradictory ideas, right? And that if one is true, the other one can't be true in the way that it's expressed. And so you like actually digging that one layer deeper to try to figure it out for yourself, that if love feels like it's real, then why would that be? Maybe can change everything about it can change everything about your life and what motivates you. And but it can, change you professionally too. It can change the kinds of things you want to do, right? I mean, I think we back impact founders because impact founders are finding the tears in society, right? The tears in the fabric of the world, and they're trying to mend them, right? And ultimately, that's like an Old Testament theological idea. That's shalom. But I don't care if that's an atheist, right? Or a secular humanist, or trying to tear those mend those tears in the fabric of the world. Like, that's good work. I would just love it for that person to work through why they care about that and why they're trying to do that. And it'll be more than therefore fulfilling work if they do.
I've got nothing to add. That was awesome. Mark, before we wrap today, where can our listeners, are you still trying the new Twitter experiment? Where can our listeners find you?
No, not really. I thought I hated it, and I went and confirmed I hate it. I mean, you can find me there. There won't be very many tweets. I will lean into my old manness. And probably the easiest thing is LinkedIn. I accept everybody that that tries to connect with me because I don't have time to vet people. And so connect there and send me a message, and I'm sure we'll find it. Or, use LinkedIn for what it should be used for, which is connect with me there. Use that to stalk my email address because it's right in the contact info, and then send me an email. And that's probably the easiest way, but I'm everywhere else too. And the website is renewvc.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us this morning, and thanks for all you're doing to, I guess, reimagine VC and all the possibilities that come with it.
Thank you. I'm one of the heroes.
Hey,
I can't handle all this positive talk.
Hey, I have a favorite T-shirt I wear. It says "Take action, make progress." I think if everybody took a little action to mend some of those tears you were talking about, I think the world would be a better place. So,
good for you.
Small way there, I'll diminish you a little bit and say,
Good,
small way do. you are making a ripple.
That's better. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks again, Mark. Well, that wraps up another edition of Be the Change Georgia. We're grateful, as always, for the opportunity to serve you with this content and grow this incredible community of purpose-driven B Corp leaders. If you haven't already, we would be grateful for you to rate this show wherever you get your podcasts by simply tapping the number of stars you think it deserves and sharing it with a friend. This helps us get the word out and continue to use our collective influence as a force for good. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the help from our production team at Chat with Leaders Media. Learn how you can launch your own podcast to grow your business at chatwithleaders.com. Thanks again for listening, and now go be a leader worth following.